So hi everybody, welcome to another podcast of the Future Tech series, a podcast series aimed at STEM graduates where myself, Charlie Sell, the MD at Arrows Group, is interviewing, speaking to CTOs, CEOs of technical businesses within the UK, asking them their thoughts, their story, thoughts on emerging technologies and future job roles. So really pleased to have Alex Chircop with me today. He's the CEO of Storage OS, a global client native storage company. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning. Really nice to be here, Charlie.
How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. It's day 155 of lockdown, so there you go for me.
Yeah. I mean, we've literally just been talking now, haven't we? That just before doing this podcast, having kids running around in the background for me, or dogs, or it's a new way of learning, isn't it? Working from home.
It definitely is. There's definitely the benefit of not having to do commutes. But yeah, home life, mixing home life and work life is always an interesting challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first question, be fascinating to know a bit about your story.
So how did I get into technology? Well, it's actually I was always very into computers and tinkering around on my ZX Spectrum and my Archimedes when I was a kid. And when I left school, I took a summer job doing coding. And at the end of that summer job, I was supposed to do my A levels and then go to university. And in the end, the company I was working for offered to take me on full time. And so I had this great dilemma because this was a few years back, and the university courses weren't quite as they are today. So I had this dilemma of, do I learn on the job or do I learn in formal education? And I kind of took the decision to learn on the job. And did all of my A levels and university diplomas sort of part time in the evenings over the next few years. And that has been a really good experience for me. I've always sort of been eager to find out more on how things work, and I guess that's driven a lot of the opportunities for me, because I've just wanted to figure out how these things work and just put myself into the right positions. Over time, I've gravitated to working in infrastructure and engineering in infrastructure, and again, primarily that was about figuring out how the computer environments and the data centers worked. And I was fortunate enough to land in financial services. So I worked for Nomura, which is a Japanese investment bank, for something like 10 years. And during that time, I was there between 2008 and 2010 when the big financial crash happened. So Nomura was sort of I guess a player in that particular story, because we ended up acquiring Lehman Brothers in Europe and in Asia when they went bankrupt, and we had this huge, enormous, once in a lifetime type project to figure out how to integrate the two different banking systems, but also how to migrate all of the environment from Lehman Brothers into the Nomura environment, and we had to do that, under a lot of scrutiny, because of course, we were in the middle of this financial crisis. So that was one of those type of projects which was 2 years in length. I probably worked every single weekend, and ended up managing to lead that project and get sort of, you know, what I kind of look back on that now and sort of see that I got 10 years of experience out of those 2 years. Um, I guess the the one thing though I'd sort of take away is that I was very, very fortunate to have the ability to move around in lots of different roles. So I've always had this focus on engineering, but I've had management opportunities and opportunities to sort of work in different silos, whether it's you know, Unix, for example, or storage or security and you know, similar sort of roles like that, and that's given me you know, a bit of a broad experience of how all of these different silos interact, and I guess that's probably one of the key bits of advice I'd give to anybody looking at a career in technology, which is um, you know, it's kind of very tempting to get stuck in one particular silo and stay there. But actually, you know, getting that broad understanding is so valuable to your long-term career. Um, and then finally, after Nomura, I was extremely lucky and I moved to Goldman Sachs, where amongst other things, I was their global head of engineering for storage. Um, And it was actually there at Goldman Sachs that we started. I sort of got some of the ideas that eventually led to creating Storage OS. So you know, we were looking at new ways of automating infrastructure and providing software-defined versions of infrastructure. And we saw this gap that where the commercial vendors, I guess, weren't keeping up with this new cloud experience that people were adopting. So you know, I have this sort of thesis that cloud isn't a place, but it's a way of managing your environment. You know, people and end users and business just love the fact that you have this self-service on-off consumption model where, you know, deployment is automated and you can get access to infrastructure with a click of a button. And I think, you know, lots of enterprises just wanted to replicate that experience in their environments. And so after Goldman Sachs, I started up Storage OS on that basis to create a software solution for storage that allowed this cloud native experience and this self-service functionality. And I must admit, it's been a wild ride transitioning from the corporate sort of culture to the startup culture. Um, I remember that first year, I actually put on a shirt and tie every single day, even though I was working from home, just to just because I'd kind of gotten into this mindset that the shirt and tie was needed to get into work mode. Um, and but it's definitely been a fantastic adventure, and sort of the concept of, you know, planting a seed, building something from scratch, building the team, and then seeing it sort of grow into a real product that's used in real organizations is such a amazing experience.
Yeah.
So sort of on that note, I would just add that, you know, if you have that spark, if you fancy being an entrepreneur, you should definitely consider taking that leap.
Yeah.
You know, it's it's so hard to actually take that leap um, because of peer pressure in some senses, right? You know, if I think back over sort of 25 years before I started Storage OS, there were multiple times when I thought, wow, that's a good idea. I wonder if I could do that. And you know, you keep getting dissuaded in some senses, because timing is never right.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more important to buy a house, or maybe it's more important to pay off some debt, or maybe it's more important to get married, or worry about your kids, or there's always some big life event in the middle. um, but the reality is, if you're passionate about something and you love something and you want to see it happen, um, take the opportunity, take the gamble, and actually you've got a lot less to lose if you try that early on in your career. Um, so it's definitely something, the one, my sort of second piece of advice would be, definitely do what you're passionate about, and do what you love. If you manage to get that in your career, then you're super lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really inspiring, because I think you're so right about that entrepreneurial sort of drive. And actually, in my experience within technology, I seem to see it, it's quite common, actually. A lot of people who get into technology seem to have, because you're always wanting to learn, aren't you? You've got to be naturally inquisitive and naturally wanting to learn and push yourself if you want to stay up to speed with advances in technology. And I think that sort of comes hand in hand with that entrepreneurial spirit. If you're willing to learn and invest and be passionate about something, it's taking that step, I guess.
It it is. That first step often looks a lot more daunting than it actually is.
Yeah.
It's good to, in my case, I sort of had the benefit of some of my experience. It certainly helps, you know, having had the previous knowledge of building a team within a corporate culture, for example. It does give you that sort of benefit, but of course nothing quite prepares you for actually working in an environment where there is no safety net, and it is just you, and it's kind of make or break.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, and really well done. And so that probably leads quite nicely, because from what you talked about, setting up, looking at cloud infrastructure storage, obviously that's what you built your product around. What is your thoughts on the emerging technologies? Probably more specific around data then, I guess, and storage as a whole. Where is it moving towards?
So from my point of view, storage has always been particularly compelling, because for two reasons. One, um, storage is this foundation layer that kind of underpins a lot of the attributes of applications and systems in general, right? So the performance, the scalability, the availability of systems is typically underpinned by that storage environment. And the reality is, every application needs to store state, needs to store data somewhere, right? And you know nobody ever in history has ever used less storage over time. They always use more storage over
Yeah,
time. Um, but but just to sort of take a step back, storage is also one of those things, because it underpins all of those things. It needs to be reliable, and therefore, what we've seen over sort of computer history is that while there have been big advancements in storage, and whether it's in hardware or algorithms or techniques, etc., storage tends to iterate a lot slower than, say, compute or networking or say web technologies. And that's because there's just a lot more legacy on that, and a lot more architecture based on that storage layer. Um, so in many ways, when it comes to storage systems, the processing of storage, the algorithms for moving data efficiently, which is again one of these key drivers in cloud environments, um, those sort of problems are actually really hard computer science problems to address, and there's a lot of innovation in that field to power the type of technology and the way the computing industry is heading towards, right? Whether it's the technology to make data and APIs available on mobile devices or remote computing devices, whether it's the ability to be able to allow applications to scale. We've moved away from the concept of having a single server that you spend lots of money and scale up and put lots of components into to provide that performance or the speed to very distributed environments, and often organizations are global or they're spread over large geographies, and the data needs to be distributed, and it needs to be accessible, and it needs to be different caching technologies, replication technologies, data protection technologies all come into play in that space. So storage is obviously an area I'm particularly passionate about, and I'm passionate about it because it falls in my view, it falls into this sort of class of technology which is called sort of deep tech. So the thing where and there are a number of other things that fall in this group, like machine learning and robotics, for example, and quantum computing, which are all still large computer science problems to address, where people are actively making enormous breakthroughs now that will have transformative effects over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, yeah, and again, that's super interesting when I think about when I speak, I do a lot in cyber, for example, and storage and cyber.
Right.
I can imagine are incredibly closely related when it comes to, well, if you're storing a lot of data, you've got to keep it secure, and it sort of goes hand in hand. And when I was speaking at a conference the other week, someone asked me my thoughts on, well, what does data actually add when it comes to thinking about advancements? And for me, I related it to things like AI. Artificial intelligence can only progress if you've got more data going into the algorithms and the programs to learn. And to get more data in, you've got to be able to store it. So it's one ecosystem rather than independent parts. And then you've got to keep it secure as well. Otherwise, you're opening to cyber hacks and all the rest of it.
Of course.
So, and like you said, that deep tech where machine learning and quantitative or computing, it is only advancing at a rate of knots, I think. So, if you are a STEM graduate and you're thinking about advancements, I personally think that the days of sort of generalist development, for example, where you may want to be a specialist developer, that's sort of going now, because of polyglot engineering, and you need to have a much wider skill set. But actually thinking around specializing either within storage or cyber or an actual area to become a subject matter expert. Do you see that when you've been building your teams? What is it that you specifically look for that would resonate to graduates?
So that last point is really important. I agree with you. The systems are by their very nature so much more distributed nowadays, and you don't have those typical silos that maybe used to be so prevalent perhaps even 10 years ago. So for example, developers are working with DevOps teams and apologize, are working with DevOps teams and have so much more input into their infrastructure environments, their storage, their security environments, their compute, their networking. It's no longer a case that a developer has a particular niche, like you mentioned, and just has some other team that does the other stuff around him. So if you're developing front end systems, you need to have a really good understanding about the APIs and how you're interacting with those backend systems. And if you're developing the backend systems, you have to have really good understanding of the different distributed technologies that you're using on those backends. And so, the the important thing is actually, when we're hiring, is we aim to find people who have a good understanding of the foundations. That having a niche is obviously important to be able to lead development in certain areas, for example. But having that broader knowledge of how those systems interact and how the different components work together is so important when it comes to defining best practice, defining not just how your system is going to work the day you develop it, but also how you do those what we call day two operations. How is your system supportable? Is it maintainable? Can you actually do an upgrade without your system being offline? Those sort of basic things, and that can only happen if you have that broader experience.
Yeah. Again, I couldn't agree with you more. So, last questions then. Thinking around future job roles, a number of our listeners may be starting their university degree, so they'll be on the job market in 3, maybe 4 years' time. If you were to navel gaze or future predict, where would you think future jobs, the evolving tech jobs might become?
Well, I know this is probably going to sound a little cliche, but I think software really is eating the world. We've moved beyond having hardware appliances that are focused on particular tasks. So nowadays, I think we kind of apply a software persona to a platform, whether it's in a data center, in a cloud, or even just managed services. And so more than ever before, certainly software should be the focus, and consider software options in areas that were traditionally hardware in the past.
Yeah.
So for example, nowadays, the best networking systems, the best security systems, the best firewalls, the best storage systems are all software-driven components that can operate in these different environments. So that's an interesting trend. The other thing I would suggest is don't limit yourself to opportunities in any particular geography, because certainly one of the things that COVID has done is probably meant that every organization everywhere has now learned how to work remotely in a way that maybe would have been alien to them even just a few months before. So I would certainly look for roles further afield than what you typically look at, because I think we're no longer bound by physical geographies in the same way that we used to before.
Yeah, and again, I totally agree with you on that point as well, with geographies and the software driven. Although interestingly, I think there's a few people who have got theories that, again, with artificial intelligence, that the traditional developer role may even start becoming obsolete as AI starts being able to do core development. So again, then thinking about software from a storage capacity, or from a site security, or from a networking, and actually what is it that the human intervention can do that AI can never do? And I think a lot of that is around trust, isn't it? Trust with the clients, trust with what we're actually trying to develop.
It is trust, but one thing that's very underrated is the person that's able to translate customer requirements or end user requirements into actual technical requirements, right? And this applies whether you have AI, whether you're doing back end, front end, or even just user interfaces. But it's often taken for granted, and it's often not necessarily the first thing you think of when you're building a team, but it's almost certainly going to be the thing that decides whether your product or whether your project or whether your technology is successful. You know, in say 20 years ago, you'd have an analyst or a business analyst that would formally have that role and be doing this.
Yeah.
Nowadays, that function is often subsumed into the developer role, and it's really important. You know, specializing in that is actually a superpower.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I couldn't agree with you more. Communication skills, along with understanding, yeah, how to translate business needs and almost plain English into technical specs, and being the intermediary there. So, Alex,
Yeah,
thank you. It's been really, really interesting, and it's great to get your thoughts again from the angle of storage OS and where you've become very obviously very passionate about. And it's an an incredible field to be in. So I think it's one of the future-proof areas as well, isn't it? It's only going to grow and be more essential and be more clients are going to need to think about how to improve on it. So yeah, thank
definitely.
you. And that's another episode of our Future Tech podcast series. It's going to be posted on our YouTube channel, on our Spotify channel, and on the career portals of the universities that we're partnered with. So again, thank you, Alex, for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And here's the next one. Thank you.